Hello everyone, welcome to a quick little video here. This video is going to be about the morphs of cripple. This is a Nightblade ability in the siphoning skill line. Historically, Crippling Grasp was always run for Magicka Nightblade DDs. Uh, the upfront damage that comes from this morph was enough to outdamage Debilitate, which would have a little bit of a longer damage over time. And historically, this was always the case. Crippling Grasp dealt more damage. They put minor Magicka Steel on Debilitate a few patches ago to give it a little bit of extra utility. Uh, and then in the Flames of Ambition patch, ZOS came out with some new status effects, one of which being the Overcharge status effect, which deals a small burst of damage and applies the minor Magicka Steel effect. The damage from Overcharged wasn't initially known. I wasn't really sure that the damage from that would put Debilitate as the new number one, and so I did a little bit of testing, and I'm here to share my results. So what I found is that, and this is something that was unknown to me, Debilitate's dot actually ticks 6 times. So it ticks when the ability initially hits the target, and then it will tick 5 more times over the 10 seconds, so once every 2 seconds. Crippling Grasp deals its initial damage, and then its damage over time actually only ticks 5 times. And this is kind of significant because the initial hit from Crippling Grasp is actually not that much higher than the combination of the first damage over time tick combined with the overcharge status effect from Debilitate. And what that means is that there's not this huge gap in DPS off of the first instance of damage, if you will, for each ability. And then as Debilitate ticks over time, that overcharge status effect just pulls it way out in front. Debilitate is much more damage than Crippling Grasp this patch. And if that's all you wanted to know, there you go. I will show some numbers as well as an Excel spreadsheet of the testing that I did. Keep in mind, I didn't do extensive testing. I just wanted to test until I could come to a conclusion, and it did not take a lot of testing to realize, okay, Debilitate is the real deal. This is an ability doing much more damage than Crippling Grasp. In some of my tests, as much as 10% more. So, let's go quick. I'm going to show you the numbers just so you know I'm not blowing smoke. And here we go. So, here's our numbers. So, this was just from one of my tests. This is a test without Thaumaturge in. It's not a very common CP to run with Nightblades. I did tests with Thaumaturge in. I did tests with out Thaumaturge in. I did tests with Flawless Ritual, which is a CP that can increase the chance of applying magical status effects. And it's worth noting, when I ran Flawless Ritual, I found that there was around a 60% chance on any given cast of Crippling Grasp to apply the overcharge status effect, versus the 6 guaranteed procs that you would get from Debilitate. So what that turned into mathematically is what we see right here, the overcharge damage on Crippling Grasp. I took the overcharge damage on average from Debilitate, multiplied that by 1. This is giving me consistent results. I had overcharge damage in my parses from Crippling Grasp, but you just can't get the amount of consistency that you get from a guaranteed proc. And since Crippling Grasp would proc it 60% of the time, or 0.6, and Debilitate would proc it 6 times, I just did 6 divided by 0.6 to get the damage difference in overcharged that you'll most often see between these two abilities. So the overcharge number here for Crippling Grasp is just the overcharge number from Debilitate times 10%, 0.1. So what are we looking at here? Crippling Grasp, this was the average direct damage that I did. Keep in mind, obviously, this is the same gear, same Mundus, etc. Between the tests. Uh, these tests were done not on the raid dummy. They were done on a practice dummy. That's worth keeping in mind. But uh, I did test on the raid dummy, and I got very similar results. So direct damage, 7k off of Crippling Grasp, and then for Debilitate, the damage over time was an average of 3,310. But when that's combined with the overcharge damage, you're looking at 4k damage. You know, 4,300, and so versus 7k. The difference there is less than 3k damage. And you can see that overcharge is already ticking for 1k each. So before we even get too far into the math, logically, you can say to yourself, well, if there's less than a 3k difference on the initial tick, then the damage over time with the overcharge is dealing 1k more. It should catch up within 2 to 3 ticks, which it does. So here we see the total damage off of Crippling Grasp on average was around 24k. Then the total damage off of Debilitate on average was 26k. And now we start getting into the discussion of, well, what if Crippling Grasp and Debilitate, what if the dots don't run their full duration? Well, in those situations, we can do the math and we can say, well, one tick less, so one less damage over time tick on Crippling Grasp results in this much damage. Just this much damage minus 3,274. For Debilitate, it's a similar story, except you must subtract both one tick of the damage over time and one tick of overcharged. So that would be, 4,345 subtracted from this number. That gives us this result. So even with one less tick, Crippling Grasp dealt 1,000 less damage than Debilitate. And this is an amount that, crit chance and so forth, it's enough that it will consistently outperform with just one tick. Now down here at 2 ticks, we see that Crippling Grasp overtakes Debilitate by 68 damage. That is not a significant amount. At that point, I would consider these two abilities functionally the same amount of damage. It's not so significant that you can split hairs about it. So what we know is that full duration Debilitate does more damage. At one less tick, so this would be 8 seconds of duration, Debilitate still does more damage. And then at 6 seconds of duration, so 2 less ticks, which is, at this point, you're grossly misusing this ability. This ability should always run its full duration. But in the situation where it only runs 6 seconds, it's a toss-up. Which for me just solidifies Debilitate as the superior morph for this patch. I hope that everyone learned something from this. If you want to stick around, I'll show briefly the Excel spreadsheets for the information that I'm working with. Obviously, these Excel spreadsheets with Thaumaturge, without Thaumaturge, without Thaumaturge on the raid dummy, with Thaumaturge and Flawless Ritual accounted for, and then without Thaumaturge and Flawless Ritual accounted for. Down here, these are the numbers that you want to look at. So this is the percent DPS difference. If Crippling Grasp dealt more damage, I divided the Crippling Grasp number by the Debilitate number. If the Debilitate damage was higher, I divided the Debilitate damage by the Crippling Grasp number. That's how you get these percent more damage, if you will. So yeah, that's what we're looking at. This is full duration. This is with one less tick, 2 less ticks, and 3 less ticks. And these are the results. If you made it this far, thanks for sticking around. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you all in the next one.